Welcome, everyone. This is John Park with the Utah League of Cities and Towns. Normally at our town hall meeting, we have Cameron Deal, but the executive director of Utah League of Cities and Towns. However, Cameron has a new guest at his house this week. A little baby girl was born last week, and somehow he thinks that's important. So he is there, and he's having me host today. Today, as far as what's going on in the Utah League of Cities and Towns the next week, one of the things we're excited about is we're going to actually start or readdress next week our COVID-free training with our own Meg Ryan. We're going to have our Throwback Thursday lunch with the league series at noon on June 4th, land use powers and duties. We'll also have a couple of other events that you can help that should on early in the week. We're planning again an economic town hall meeting and bring you up to date that. If you don't, please get on our website and sign up for our email blasts, and that'll help you know what's going on. Today we're going to visit several subjects. We have with us Scott Henderson. He's a Provo City Parks and Rec Director, and Bryce Merrill, who is a Provo Recreation Center Director, and also Derek Riker, American Fork Recreation Director. And they're going to talk about opening our rec centers and pools. They've been doing that, some of them a couple of weeks, and I think Derek just started this week. And Matt Dixon, the city manager from South Ogden City, is going to be joined by his Public Works Director, John Anderson. And they opened their splash pad this week, and they're going to talk about some of the things that went right, some of the things that went wrong, and what to watch out for. And then we'll wrap it up today with Joel Tucker. Joel is the Director of Libraries with Washington County, and Alan Anderson is the Assistant Director. And they're going to talk about the libraries in Washington County that are now fully opened, of course, with the new normal. And we'll just take it from there. So let's just turn the time over to Scott and Bryce, and they're going to talk about their rec center.
All right, well, thank you for this opportunity. I think we looked at when we moved from to the moderate level and now we're to low, each one has required a deep dive into these guidelines. And as we all know together, sometimes these guidelines change at the last minute, and all of those require a plan to go through that. But we really took the approach in Provo Parks and Recreation to set up our facilities in a safe manner that allows people to make individual decisions on coming into these facilities in a safe manner, and obviously educating them. Our mayor and our public information officer have done an excellent job here in Provo about getting the word out and making sure we're using consistent messaging. I know Bryce has prepared, focusing on specifically on the rec center, some elements that he has used for controls and how we adapt to these new guidelines. If you're able to screen share, you'll have some great visuals to show you, or I'm sure Bryce will be able to speak his way through it too. But I'll turn it over to him, and then we can operate, based on what you see there. We have found that people have been very receptive to coming back, but it has been a slow return. People are coming in, and we are increasing in our numbers as our citizens become more and more comfortable with being out and doing these same activities. So gradually, slow but sure, we're hoping to get back to what we experience as a normal now. We tried to add to our capacity in swimming, originally in moderate. Open swimming, they called it open plunge, was going to be available. Then they pulled that towards the end, and so now in low it is available. So we made sure, and we got our outdoor pool open to add to that square footage to be able to spread people out and be able to increase both our capacity and safety. And then Bryce will hopefully show some images of that and talk about what logic we used by setting these reduced numbers that they talked about in aquatics, and how we accommodated the rec center to make sure we're safe while people are working out in fitness or in gyms or whatever activity they choose at the rec center. So Bryce, do you want to take it?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Like Scott mentioned, it was a coordinated effort to craft together some of our policies and practices from the governor's, I think now currently 4.5 plan, as well as our own city's Proceed with Caution communication initiative. Um, and and having that information has been critical in us, staying up with what is the latest recommendations and guidelines and trying to adapt our operation to that. We opened to under the moderate guidelines on May 5th, a few days after they had moved to moderate. And a lot of the focus for us was on each of our areas. For the last 7 years, we've operated and had a lot of success in not throttling different activities at different points in the recreation center. Once we got them in the door, they were able to choose and go where they would like to without a lot of interference from staff. And that proved to be difficult with some of these adjustments to make sure that the social distancing was successful in the different elements in the different places. Obviously, a lot of varying within the governor's guidelines. We saw a lot of recommendations for different types of businesses where they treat aquatics and fitness separately than childcare or individual services or food operations. And for us, up until this point, once you got past the front door, we allowed those operations to all sort of blend together. And so we had to sort of go back and re-divvy up the recreation center and the facility and the patron sort of traffic flow in different areas in alignment with the different guidelines. It looks like I'm not able to screen share, unfortunately, but if needed, we can get those images out. But we went through space by space, and so we first focused on the membership check-in process. And so we put our symptom checking, our temperature checking right at the place of the front door, so that right when patrons came in, they had an idea that things were different, that we were being an active partner and trying to help them stay safe and to slow the spread of coronavirus. We also had a number of signs and an entire sign campaign, both in alignment with our city's Proceed with Caution initiative, but also specific to the recreation center. Things like putting A-frames in the middle of the basketball courts to prevent drop-in or pick-up sports, markers on each of our fitness studios floors to show the social distancing space, to show a new capacity for a fitness class environment. On aquatics, a number of signs, and I know Derek's going to speak specifically to aquatics, so I won't get too into that, but a number of signs throughout the pool decks and at the doors to each pool so that we can better track the ebb and flow of capacity to make sure that we're staying in line with the guidelines. And then, of course, for our employees to add a number of PPE stations throughout the facility to make it safe and sanitized for them to check in, to use shared workspaces, to use shared clock-in computers, and really consider it from their perspective. A lot of the safety came in reducing the overall capacity and communicating that to our members. It was important that they knew what to expect before they got here and were able to experience it. We found that if we communicated well, and we have not had a lot of issues or problems with patrons once they are in the facility. They understand it, they are willing to comply, they just sort of have to know what to do. And so we've had a really successful social media campaign. A lot of that, we gained a lot of followers through the Zoom fitness classes that I know a lot of municipalities were engaging in. And so with that newfound traffic, I think we gained 2,000 or 3,000 followers on our specific channels. We were able to communicate a lot of that in advance. Some of the other operating principles that we use to sort of guide the reopening is we wanted to focus on the education of social distancing and the opportunity to focus to social distance, and less on enforcing that in the facility. And so we focused a lot on overall capacity per studio, capacity per fitness floor, education and signage, and less on trying to distinguish if two people were allowed to play pickleball together. Were they already living together? Are they roommates? Are they spouses or family? And more on just making sure the right number of people are in there so that they can take care of that. That was a really—
Bryce?
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but you should be able to share your screen now if you wanted to show that.
Oh, thank you.
And while he's doing that, I'd like to remind you all listening that if you have any questions, just please put it on your chat box and we will either answer it or we'll ask the question. So go ahead, Bryce.
Great. And just to make sure, we're all seeing moderate operating plans now, is that right?
You got it.
Awesome. We wanted to focus going to, there's a lot of questions of, do we feel good charging our members to have a membership at the facility when we're open under moderate guidelines? And we have not yet started charging our members. We've been open for 3 weeks, and charges will resume on the 1st of June. But we wanted to make sure that we found that sweet spot of value of the membership and the level of services being offered. Obviously, a lot of individual situations of who was comfortable coming back when, and so focus on protecting the relationship with them. We have really focused on communicating shared responsibility, that no matter what, even if we have 10 people in the whole facility, we're a 165,000 square foot facility. If they all choose to go to the same corner of the facility, social distancing has failed. And so what we've really pushed is to talk about the shared partnership or shared responsibility between our patrons and their individual choices, and what we are doing as a facility staff to give them every opportunity. And then, like I mentioned, the expectation of what will happen is exceeded by the experience once they're here. We've increased a lot of reservations with online app system and went from there. And I know we're just wrapping up here with our time, but what we found has been one of the most exciting things for us as a municipal staff is that we have had a chance to reevaluate a lot of our regular policies and practices that we have just done the last 7 years. An example I've heard is that this is like a forest fire, and it's been devastating, and it came really, really quickly, and it has disrupted so many of the things that we do. But in the wake of a forest fire, you have a chance to have brand new practices, these little saplings that are able to grow in a really healthy environment. And we have found that with so much of what we're doing as a facility and as a staff. Obviously, this is not an ideal situation, but as we sort of come out of it, we've had a number of things like online memberships change, or we made substantive changes to the way we schedule group fitness because we had a 7-week closure. We had a chance to hit a reset button and really dig into what we were doing and making sure that it was the best for us. So as we've moved to yellow in the last week, we are leaving our symptom screening in place, our temperature checks in place, and we're really excited about that. I think it shows our commitment to keeping our residents safe and making sure that the first impression they have when they walk in is a facility that is doing its part to prevent the spread. We've now allowed drop-in sports. Derek will talk a lot about some of the things that we're seeing in Aquatics. We've reopened the indoor playground, and we have access available to senior amenities. Obviously, we're not quite to programming or anything like that, but that's what we're already planning on as a staff. We're sort of one plan ahead, and we're making sure that when the new normal does come, we've got things in place for senior programs and sport leagues, things to take steps towards returning to municipal events or large-scale events and sport tournaments and events like that. And then building the plans in a way that we stay flexible. I hope that this is the last time in each of our careers and lives that we experience a pandemic of this scale. But to develop our plans in a way that, I hope it's not as common as like a Utah Red Air Day, but it's something that we can come and go to, and we can stay adaptable to what we're seeing and what the recommendations are coming from the experts, so that we have some plans in place for social distancing or capacity limiting, throttling that we're able to implement when it makes sense. So those
are Bryce, when people come into the recreation center, do they have to tell you where in the rec center they're going to go and you assign it? Is that how you're keeping your spacing and prohibit overcrowding in a particular studio or an area?
Great question. It's different for each area. For fitness, the industry standard before this pandemic had been that there are reservations, there are limited spots in fitness classes. And so we've kept that system alive and going, obviously greatly reducing the capacities of fitness studios, spin studios, but we maintain an online reservation software system that has been very successful for us, and we'll continue to use that. For things like the swimming pools, we are using human staff members to track and count capacity in and out of the indoor and outdoor pool areas. They report that back to staff, who can then update a color-coded online system through social media to let people know that we're 75, 90, or 100% of leisure swim capacity. So we're able to help families and individuals make real-time decisions as to if they want to come down and join us. So it's a little bit of everything. It's an overall facility count. It's a leisure aquatic facility count. It's online reservation systems for things like racquetball and pickleball and some drop-in sports and fitness classes. So it depends on the particular activity, but a lot of people counting and tracking.
Pretty extensive restructure of the fitness floor about moving equipment 6 feet away from each other so individuals can still come in, do individual activities that are not associated with a class or a reservation, those things. And the facility is already set up for that safe participation too. So that keeps us from having to have them make a commitment where they are going in it, and that we set up each area to be safe for their use.
Okay, very good. Very good. Did 4.5, guidelines 4.5, which by the way, we can make available at our league website, but it's also available on coronavirus.utah.gov. That just came out yesterday. Did you review that, and were there any changes you had to make, or were there any suggested changes for your recreation programs?
I think one thing that I saw, and Bryce can chime in too, but there was they made temperature checking as if possible, where I felt like we were doing that at our front entrance at our rec center before, and we do it at our ice arena, and it was a requirement at the arts center for performers, but we were doing that before it was really set as a requirement. And that turned into a positive PR element that Bryce talked about, is that it kind of gave the comfort that they know we care and that we're checking. But it sounds like I just went and I utilized police and fire for procurement, but I just went to them for more thermometers for checking participants, since that was a recommendation in 4.5 in our sports camps and our sports programs that will be starting up here. So, and our tennis lessons, for another example. So we are going more widespread, because even though they left it if possible, we made sure to try to find a way to make it possible.
Make it possible, great. Wonderful. Okay, Mr. Riker, you want to add to this about what you're doing with your pools?
Yeah, thanks, John. So the pools, the aquatics follows very closely what's being done in the rec centers, the facilities. A lot of pools are connected to the rec centers, and so a lot of the parameters are the same. And for the pools that don't have a rec center or a facility, they can replicate what's happening in the facility. So pool specific, I would say through this process, the aquatic professionals in the state of Utah have been very proactive. There's been a lot of collaboration and planning, and I think each of the pools are very well prepared to be open and to open properly. The first emphasis was on employee safety and training, where lifeguards have been out of work for a while, where pools have been closed, to make sure that we brought them back and provided them the proper training, get them in the swimming pool to improve their conditioning, and provide them the PPE that they needed, and working with the Red Cross to extend certifications that were needed, and getting creative on how to certify new employees. So I think each of the facilities have done that to prepare to open their pools. Some lifeguards got comfortable being at home and weren't too anxious to get back to work, but now that the temperatures are coming up, they're coming back. So I think it was important to do the things that Bryce talked about, of having a professional appearance and being prepared for when people come to the facility, and setting the expectations. With the pools, I think one of the tricks has been, we do have reduced capacity in the pool, and we're expecting social distancing on the pool deck, and are having to make a choice. Are we going to police that, or are we going to encourage it? Because people like to get to the pool and they like to get together and talk. And so the signage that Bryce has talked about, the social media campaigns have all been very important to let people know what the expectation is. I would say most pools are choosing to have the users self-police themselves and not use their lifeguards as enforcers. But there probably will need to be some of that. So setting that expectation. Locker rooms was a big debate as it went through the different stages of moderate, low, and looking to green. what I've seen, most facilities are opening their locker rooms and making those available, requiring a cleansing shower before getting in to use the pool and the facility, and trying to get them to exit the facility as soon as they're done. So don't hang around in the locker room, grab your stuff and head out for the next people to come in. So no one that I've talked with has been at capacity yet. Seems like the people are coming back slowly. The lap swimmers are filling up the lap lanes, and I think as the temperatures continue to rise this week, the open plunge is getting more and more busy. So as Bryce talked, using people to count those numbers and try to manage that flow. So I think pools are in a good spot. I think they're going to be attractive for people, and we'll see them come back.
And so someone asked, said, Derek, are you open today? That was one of the questions they had, but you are open today.
We are open today. Yep, we opened Monday, and it's been fantastic.
Great. And so under the guidelines, there's social distancing is required on the deck, but there's really no requirement in the pool other than just limiting capacity, correct?
Correct.
And the lap swimming under yellow, lap swimming can happen with more than one person in a lane, correct?
Yep. And swim team can resume, and swim lessons can resume.
Okay. And great. Somebody's let's go to Matt and John Anderson, Public Works Director, South Ogden, and City Manager Matt Dixon.
Thanks, John. If I wasn't already glad that I don't operate a pool in the city, I am now. Hats off to those of you who run those large facilities and all that you're doing to keep the residents safe. Those are wonderful facilities, but I don't envy those who have to manage them and maintain those over time. That's a lot of work, and I'm sure a lot of headaches. Yeah, this one's an easier one, to have a splash pad, but John asked that we just talk a little bit about what South Ogden is doing. I'm far from the splash pad expert, but I do have my Public Works Director, John Anderson, on the call to answer any of the real technical questions. Just so you know, we have one splash pad, and it's in our nature park. It's a feature that has 8 separate features within the splash pad area, and there is a small play fence around the structure, which does help us somewhat. Under the direction of our local health department and in reviewing the guidelines from the state, we did open on Monday. We typically open on Memorial Day and operate through Labor Day. We've posted signage. According to the health department, they wanted us to limit the number of kids that are in the play area to 8 to 10. And so we've posted signage just basically asking the public to help self-police that. We don't have the staffing capability to man that 24/7 during the day. So we've put the public on notice that under health department guidelines, we encourage them to follow the social distancing protocols within the park, and then please limit the number of children in the play area to 8 to 10. Our employees are sanitizing all the touch points in the restrooms as they go and inspect throughout the day. As you know, these facilities, you have to test the water, test the chlorine levels, and do those kinds of things. So our employees have been asked, and there's equipment there for them to do that. Also, at the 2 entry points through the fencing into the actual play area, we have hand sanitizer that's available and provided for the public use. That's the extent of my knowledge on the issue, but I am happy to ask John Anderson to chime in and offer any ideas or things that I've missed, and certainly available to answer any questions any of you have. John?
I think Matt's covered it pretty good. Like he said, we opened Monday. Our participants are down just like everywhere else. Monday, we didn't have hardly anybody. As the temperatures rise, we're starting to see more people. So I've been intrigued to kind of go by and see what's taking place. So far, so good. The people are actually inside the splash pad, I've actually been pleasantly surprised. People are, monitoring what's in there. The biggest surprise for us, we have playgrounds close by, and it shifted the kids to the playgrounds. And we kind of didn't think of that. So that was kind of a shock to us as people are waiting to get in the splash pad. They're going over, they're congregating over towards the playground, which is kind of we're taking some precautions there with some disinfectant and a few things. As far as the social distancing on the lawn, we got a big open area that people are very good at this, this stage. Granted, we've only been open the 4 days, but people are doing very well at this point.
Good. And so we talked a little bit, or Matt talked a little bit about, and John about additional cleaning and those type of things. Scott and Derek and Bryce, what are you doing in your facilities to make sure that weights are sprayed down after they're used, so on and so forth, bicycles, those kind of things, exercycles actually?
Well, one thing we have found in the post-COVID world is operating a rec center is much more expensive because now you have all these new sanitation guidelines. And Bryce and I have had more than a couple talks about the amount of staffing that both in custodial and in other staffing areas that we have had to dedicate to locker room cleaning, disinfecting. We even involve the patrons post fitness classes in those type of elements. We are getting into areas like our indoor playground much more often. I think I told staff that I still am waiting for the first complaint from someone to say, you're cleaning too much, we can't utilize these things. So, it's really about making a point in doing these, in getting into these areas as best as we can. In our park restrooms, which I know is probably not part of this discussion, but we're trying to get in there 3 or 4 times a day now to sanitize and get into those areas because, this choice between locker rooms open or closed or bathrooms open or closed, there's a health risk with those closed also. So those facilities need to be available. Bryce, do you want to share some of the, staffing impacts and what are some of the techniques you used from a custodial standpoint?
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things we've had is the electrostatic fogger machines, which are able to clean at a pretty rapid rate, to sanitize at a pretty rapid rate as opposed to getting in there and cleaning. And that's obviously where we are most needing the additional cleaning right now. So the purchase of those has been definitely worth it and helps us move through like an area of dumbbell racks, which could take an individual 30 minutes to wipe every touch surface. We're able to hit in just a couple of minutes. And so trying to stay ahead of that has really been helpful. And then like Scott said, to engage our patrons as partners in this process, ending the fitness classes 10 minutes early, and then having the instructor methodically take each of them through what needs to be done, and then being there with them while they do that to ensure that we are sanitizing every touch point has been effective. So it would not be possible without a partnership from our users, but they have been very, I don't want to say compliant. I mean, they've been a great partner in this process and keeping it safe. We are fortunate to be a larger staff and a larger facility. So we have had some of the room to triple the amount of custodial staff or to use down guards to hit locker room chairs and everything like that. But really, there's no way around it. It just takes a lot more people to do this level of sanitizing.
Okay, you mentioned something that I was not familiar with, some kind of sanitizing machine or fogging machine. What is that?
It's a little bit science fiction, but essentially you take a chlorine-based cleaner that sanitizes and it sprays it out like a super soaker, but it's like a fogging thing, and so it does a large area of touch points relatively quickly. It won't clean it, but it'll sanitize it, and so that's obviously what we're focused on.
Yeah, that's what we want. Okay. Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Let's shift gears here a little bit, and I looked far and wide for someone who had I actually didn't look far and wide. I called Adam Lenhart down in St. George City, and he mentioned that Washington County libraries were open. And so we have representing them today, we have Joel Tucker, who is the director of libraries, and also with him, Alan Anderson, the assistant director. and they're pretty well adapting to the new normal down there with their libraries. So Joel and Alan, you want to tell us what's going on down there?
Yeah, we're doing our best. So I just want to talk a little bit about the timeline that we went through, and just highlight that there are a few different kind of concerns that we're taking into consideration as we make these changes within Washington County. And I think one of the big things that we need to consider is the difference in impact, I think, from somebody like up in Salt Lake City or in Summit County as opposed to Washington County. I don't think we were hit as hard down here. I mean, we did get hit, but I think not as hard. So that gave us a little bit more flexibility and freedom to not close down as fast and to reopen sooner than normal. I think just to walk through us, March 12th or so, some of the libraries across the state started closing, limiting operations and stuff like that. We didn't go to limited operations until March 17th. And then we stayed open quite a bit beyond those limited operations. And for us, limited operations meant people can come in and check out items, but access to the computers were limited, access to the meeting rooms, no more programming. So we kind of shut off those public kind of let's get together kind of facilities and shared resources, but still allow people to come in and check items out, sign up for a library card. A lot of people were doing that in the beginning because they didn't have a library card and wanted access to our online resources. So to be able to go to limited operations from that point was really helpful for that kind of thing. We actually closed the doors on March 27th. So you can see the big span of time where we went from limited operations on the 17th, and then 10 days later, a lot of the libraries across the state, especially in those harder hit areas, were closing a lot sooner than us. But we closed the doors on March 27th, and we started an inventory process so I could keep my employees gainfully employed and really go through the work of tracking what we have in the library, finding those lost materials, cleaning up our trace and missing records, and really making good use of the employees while the doors were closed. From there, on April 20th, we moved to curbside, which allowed patrons to have access to holds, and we would bring the holds out to them. That was by far one of the busiest time periods in my life in the library, is working through that curbside process. There was a lot of popularity there and a lot of people trying to get access to the holds that they were looking for. And then on May 1st, when the state moved to orange, we started a tiered process. So our opening was every week we'd tier it up a little more. The first tier on May 1st, we did the limited operations process again. So we allowed people to come in, check out items, get their stuff and go. But we still, no computer use, no programming, no meeting room use. It's just really intended to be like a 15-minute visit. Come get your stuff and go. The following week on tier 2, we opened up computer use. One of my thought processes as far as kids not at school, I wanted to be able to offer some computers to the community so that they can have access to those resources. I know that for me, it went a long time without that access, and I felt like we were missing out on an opportunity. So being able to open up the computer access, we created kind of 6-foot distance between the computers and closed down some of the computers in between and started a cleaning process to where we can clean the computer after every use so the next person can use it safely. That was tier 2. We allowed small use of the meeting rooms, but still no programming. Then on May 15th, I think the state went to yellow about May 12th. Apparently Washington County went yellow a little before that. We got a letter from the governor to that effect. But on May 15th, we opened up for full access. People can use the meeting rooms a little more. Programming was started again. And just whatever we were restricted on, we did the most that we can to lift those restrictions. We still watch the capacity, but for the most part, most people are a little slow in returning to those public venues, so we haven't had to watch that very closely, just because it hasn't been used. Really, the curbside was the busiest use. So going a few weeks without library services and then opening up curbside really allowed a lot of the people were really taking advantage of that resource. I looked on the state library website has tracking on which libraries are open and which libraries are closed. I thought you might be interested in that kind of thing. Today, as far as the website is updated, there are 21 libraries that are closed and 22 libraries that are offering curbside or some sort of limited service like that. There's 18 libraries with limited service, like when we did our initial tiered limited service kind of option. There's currently 9 libraries that are open with full service. But really, I think that for me, we had a few positive things that happened during the whole process. One of them was Wi-Fi expanded into the parking lots. The state library put out some grant funding for that kind of thing. So we got, as a library, I have 8 branches in the system, $100 per branch. I got $800 that I can use to put Wi-Fi out into the parking lot. And then later on, we got a CARES grant for $2,700 that allowed us to not have to do a match on that original grant, but it allowed us to really pay for that project in full, plus help us gain access to more cleaning materials and other resources. One thing that Washington County, I'm pretty proud of, that we've been focusing before COVID-19 on our online resources. We've purchased RB Digital and really are working with the state consortium on Overdrive and having access to that in larger quantities. During COVID-19, we were looking, like Bryce was saying, that we're looking for opportunities to how can we improve our services and grow from this. And we've started an online payment process that we didn't have before. We were waffling before on that, and as COVID-19 hit, that gave us the opportunity to say, okay, let's do this and make it happen, which really allows patrons to have access to be able to pay their fines and get access to those online resources without having to call in or without having to come visit us. Another thing,
when we talked the other day, let me interrupt for a minute. When we talked the other day, you said that originally you were going to have someone keep track of the amount of people that are entering the library, but you found that people's hesitation to come back in kind of compensated for that, and they're just not coming in to the number of people you would expect.
not in the numbers that we used to have. Alan, you can help me out with the programming numbers here at St. George, our biggest branch. We used to have 30 kids coming to the programs, and now we have 5 to 10 kids. So it's really, yeah, there's a lot of self-limiting going on.
So yes, on our first day that we had story time, when it returned, we had multiple sessions. And that's another thing too, that I think you talked about that in the pools as well, which is, as you expand, maybe you have more opportunities for the events. And so if we have 3 or 4 story times and we have 5 or 6 or whatever to each, where we used to have 30, you have 3 or 4 events and you have 5 at each thing, then you're at 25. So I think maybe spreading things out is a key to that as well. Like Joel said, I think our first day back, we had 12 participants, but I think our biggest group was like 5 or 6.
So Alan, what are you doing with your return books? Are you doing any additional cleaning that, deeper cleaning that you were doing before?
Well, yes, before we didn't wash stuff as it came in. I think Joel talked about the inventory, and that was part of our effort there too. When we closed to the public, was to actually, we went through with disinfectant. I think Brady, we got some Spartan disinfectant cleaner that we've actually applied to book covers and sprayed. So we're disinfecting everything still as it comes through the book drop. I think that people are appreciative of that. I think Scott addressed the fact that he's waiting for complaints. Wasn't that you, Scott, that said that you're waiting for complaints possibly from people for cleaning too much? But I think as people see us clean, they appreciate the fact that we are cleaning as we clean desks and tables, and let them know that we're having everything come through one book drop. And we explain the reason for that is we're disinfecting covers and things.
I know a lot of times library computers are kind of a base for people that otherwise wouldn't have access to Wi-Fi or access to computers, people like the homeless and people on the lower economic kind of threshold, Are you seeing those kind of folks back in your library that you're providing that service?
Yes, actually, that was one of the places where we did get some complaints, not only from homeless, and I think that on the chat board, Lisa had said, how's that affecting the homeless?
Yeah.
We have seen the homeless return, but more so, I think we also have people in the community that are not homeless, but maybe are on the economic spectrum where they don't have as much, in terms of resource and stuff to buy computers or to pay for internet access. And that has been one of the first complaints we got when we opened the doors. A man came and talked to Joel and I and said, I can't afford internet at home, and I haven't had internet. And so we're seeing people like that return. One way we address that is we do clean the stations as well, and we have them see us clean them with the disinfectant. We want them to feel comfortable. Also, we have them schedule a time, and then we're keeping the social distancing, as Joel indicated, between the computers.
Okay. I've been impressed with all the panelists today. It seems like, well, first of all, they mentioned several times they're working with their local health department, which all of us need to keep in mind that they're an important player in what we're trying to accomplish. But I think everyone that is presented has used this opportunity to deal with this COVID crisis, as we call it, to look forward and see how they can better serve their communities, how they can better serve their patrons. And I'm very impressed. And I think that's one of the probably the coolest things that I think we do as cities is oftentimes we're forced into a situation, but we look at it and go, yeah, this is kind of cool. So anyway, thank you. Any other comments from our panelists today?
I'd like to say just one more thing, just for us, the key takeaways. One of the big ones is just reinforcing communication, communication with the public, communication with the patrons, communication with our government leaders, like you were saying, the public health officer, but maintaining that good communication to let people know. And the more that they know, the more comfortable they are in following our guidelines and helping us be more effective in combating the COVID-19 problem. So.
Yeah, another way I think communication kind of raised its head today is when Derek talked a little bit about they wanted to make sure that they communicated with their staff who may or may not have felt comfortable where they were because they haven't been being a lifeguard, for instance, over the last several weeks, and wanted to make sure that all that training is in place too. And I'm sure we had to all do a lot of additional training where we're going. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, and that wraps up our town hall meeting for this Thursday, and appreciate all that have participated. And Bryce, would you mind sending your PowerPoint to me, and I'll make sure that's available to everyone. Okay, thank you. Thank you all.